From Boston, Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett. And last April and May, if you were looking at this program, you saw all the way beneath these crabapple trees a regular blizzard of daffodils. I'm planting some more daffodils in here right now. Now you noticed, if you noticed the show last spring, you saw that those daffodils were not in pots, they weren't in beds, they weren't in rows. They looked as though they had been growing wild underneath the trees, and that's what we call naturalizing. Now they're lovely to look at, and you can get great armloads of blossoms from them. Now, of course, this is the time that you have to plant them here in the fall if you want them for next spring. Now, not all kinds of bulbs are good for naturalizing, and all kinds aren't good for our particular place. For example, I'm choosing the tall growing narcissus in here because this is toward the back of the garden and they are most effective, more effective than small bulbs would be at a distance. But there are a number of small bulbs that you can naturalize in an intimate sort of a way, where you get close viewing. For example, grape hyacinths are wonderful that way, crocuses, chionodoxes, the snowdrops, and various kinds of squill. I have them in my own garden at home, coming up year after year with no care. Now, one thing that you don't want to do is to plant ordinary tulips because they will divide after flowering, and you have to dig them up and reset them. Some species tulips can be naturalized. Hyacinths I don't think are too good for naturalizing. Now, when you choose a site, use a place where you get spring sunshine. Underneath deciduous trees such as this is an ideal place. But wherever you plant them, you must allow for the life cycle of the bulb. Now let's just take a bulb such as this. This is a narcissus bulb. It has to be planted now to make a root system, come up next spring and blossom. Then comes the leaf growth. And those leaves must mature or the plants won't be able to make energy in the bulbs for blossoming another year. Therefore, plant them in an area of your garden or lawn where you will not have to cut it until, in this part of the country, the latter part of June. So when we plant them, when we naturalize them, this is the way I do it. You just throw them out on the ground. Wherever they land is where they're planted. Now, I know people who take all the risk out of it, throw them over their shoulder. Wherever they land, they plant them. Now, to plant them, this is what you do. Stick your spade right down in around and lift out a piece of the sod, just like that. You see, now we have a hole. We drop in a little bone meal, about a tablespoonful of bone meal in the bottom. Scratch that in a little bit. Set the bulb down at the bottom about 3 times. It's the depth about 3 times the diameter of the bulb. Step on it, and you can hardly tell that the sod was even disturbed. Well, let's go from here. And today we're going to we're going to pick some cauliflower. We're going to pasteurize some compost to use in our houseplants. And in my plant clinic, I have a very sad-looking passionflower vine. But now, let's go over and we'll pick some peas. Now, it was 10 weeks ago that I planted some peas over in this garden, and they're now ready for harvest. And let's see, we'll just pick a few of these and see what they're like. This is the ordinary so-called English pea. Get into these pods, beginning to come. Not very large pods in this variety, but nevertheless, the peas at this time of the year are really delicious, just as crisp as can be. I want to tell you that one of the good things about planting peas is that not only do you get a crop such as this, but you enrich the soil. Now, peas are legumes. Beans are legumes, clover is legume. They have the ability to take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fix it, so-called, and put it in the soil. Now, I want to just pull up one of these vines that we have harvested and show you what I mean. Down on the roots, we should find some very small bumps. And here you see them. You can get down pretty close for this, but those little nodules there at my thumbnail, these are the kinds of things where the nitrogen is stored. I'm going to let these plants, after I get through harvesting them, just stay right here in the ground, because this nitrogen is in these roots. It will decay. We'll dig the tops in the spring and enrich the soil. Now, I was in Vermont a few weeks ago, and a man was growing a field of clover for this very purpose. Dig that clover into the ground, enrich the soil. You're getting free nitrogen right out of the atmosphere. Now let's pick some of that early purple head cauliflower. Now, for the last 2 weeks, you've been watching the progress of this cauliflower. 2 weeks ago, it was about the size of a teacup. Last week, it was 4 or 5 inches across, and now it's certainly as big as a football, and it's ready for harvest. If you notice closely, the head of this plant is made of flower buds which have not opened, and that's the secret of harvest. Get them when those buds are still young and tender. Maybe you hear an airplane going overhead right this minute. Now, what we do here is just take a sharp knife and cut this head off. Now, the cauliflower, this early purple head, you've perhaps heard me say before, turns a pale green when it's cooked. Absolutely delicious. I think it's better tasting than the white cauliflower, but you be your own judge. Takes a long time to grow one of these. We planted them in May, and here in October we're at the harvest. Well, we've harvested the crop from that. I'm going to harvest the plant as well. That's going right over into my compost pile. This is one of the things which I certainly advise you to do in your garden. Don't let anything go to waste. Make this old cauliflower plant enrich your soil for another year. Now, for the moment, let's toss that on top of the compost pile, because next week we're going to come over here with a shredder and break up some of that material so it will decay a little quicker. Now, I said that I'd like to have some compost to take indoors this winter to use as a potting soil. And I'll tell you, your houseplants will really grow if you do that. Well, now right in here is some of my compost that's pretty well decayed. And you can see that there's some portions of it, and there's another big plane going over. They seem to be over the flight path this morning. Roots of things which have not decayed. So what I'm going to do, rather than take these coarse things indoors, is to sift it. I've set up a screen here of 1/2-inch hardware cloth. And with this situation, you just throw the compost against it. The fine particles go through. The coarse ones we'll put back into the compost pile for recycling. That's all there is to sifting. And this is something, it'll last you for 25 years and you still can use it. Marvelous way of sifting your soil easily. Well, now we have the sifted material, and that is really fine and beautiful. Now, you might say that that's ready for the house, but it isn't, because buried in here are all kinds of insect eggs, insect and weed seeds. Well, I don't want to introduce any of those into my houseplants, so this is what I've done with some. What I'm going to do is pasteurize it, and I have some pasteurizing it, some being pasteurized right now over here. Now, let me tell you that I have pasteurized compost and soil in a pressure cooker in the kitchen, in an oven in the kitchen, and the smell that comes off of that will just drive you out of the house for days. So get your old barbecue warmed up again. Use some of those charcoal bits that you hadn't used during the summer. Put that compost into a pan and steam it. What I want to do, now you see I have here a thermometer, a meat thermometer, up to 180 degrees. hold it there for a 30-minute period, and all of the bugs and the eggs and the weed seeds will be gone. Now this is just about cooked. I'm going to put this into another pan here and drop it right in there. That steam is a wonderful thing to see. That, by the way, is exactly the way that the professionals do it, except that they use heavier equipment. What they're interested in doing is killing all the problems before they get to planting their crops. I want to talk to you about roses for a minute, because many a person is tempted to prune their rose bushes in the fall. Now this plant, in this part of the northern part of the country, still trying to blossom, but these buds were killed by a frost here the last couple of nights. What I want to advise you not to do is just don't cut your plants back in the fall if you live in the north. Allow all of the winter killing that's going to take place, and some will take place, let it occur. Next spring, when the new growth starts, then you know what is alive and what's dead, and you can prune them. Now we're going to come back, by the way, in a few more weeks to how to protect rose bushes through the winter months. Now we're coming to a way to prolong the gardening season, both in the spring and in the fall. The method I'm using is an old English method called a cloche. And a cloche is, you might say, sort of a portable a cold frame, or almost like a little miniature greenhouse. You see it's shaped like a Quonset hut, and it slips right over a crop growing in a row. Now you see here a crop of ruby lettuce coming along. In about 3 weeks that will be ready for harvest. But let me show you how to make one of these cloches, because they're made of corrugated fiberglass that you could buy at any lumber company. You can either get the clear or the translucent material. And look at that first of all. Corrugated fiberglass, 2 feet wide and 4 feet long. Then I made this little sort of a croquet wicket made of stiff wire with a stretcher across the center, which holds the fiberglass in this bowed shape. I'm going to slip that back over it again, I think. Well, it went on so easily the first time. Now let's push this right on down. You see that holds it in shape, and we can slide that over the plants again. Oh, by the way, I didn't point out to you that these legs down below, you see, stick down into the ground, and they keep it from blowing away. Slip that down like that. Push it down snugly, and we have a nice cozy place. We're using solar heat to heat up this air around the plants to let them grow. Now, should it get too hot, we have at the end of the row just a little piece of plastic, flat plastic, which we can slide down like that during the night, and also to keep the air warm. If it gets too hot, take it off and let the breezes sweep through. At night, when your temperature gets down to 20 degrees, 25 degrees, throw a blanket or tarpaulin over the top to conserve the day's heat. Now we're getting ready to harvest a crop we planted last July, which is called Chinese cabbage. Now, Chinese cabbage is unique in that if you plant it in the springtime, it often sends up flowers. If you plant it in the middle of summer to harvest in the fall, you get this delightful head of great big foliage. Now, this is what I'm looking for, truly a beautiful plant, the Chinese cabbage. Now here you see something bigger than a football, absolutely handsome, and of course it's good to eat either fresh in a salad or cooked. Chinese cabbage, planted in the summertime, harvested in the fall. Then we have next to that another plant which I haven't harvested before, what's called the collards. Now the collards get to be rather big plants, but the big leaves aren't the ones to eat. It's these smaller leaves up here close to the top of the plant, but not the tip itself, but leaves about this size. Drop those in a pan of lightly salted water and cook them quickly. You'll have a lot of vitamins and a lot of nutrients, a lot of mineral content in this kind of a green, which in the south is able to grow almost all winter long and still keep producing. A plant whose flavor is enhanced by the appearance of the first frost. Well, let's go from here, and we'll plant some garlic for next summer. Now, you can buy your garlic at any supermarket. And this is the ordinary garlic bulb, just as it comes to you. You know, the garlic has this outer tunic to the bulb, and you split the bulb open, and you come to a number of sections which are called cloves. Now, it's the cloves, it's these separate pieces, such as this, that we plant in the garden. I want to break this up a little bit and show you just what we have. You know, if you've used these in the kitchen, your recipes can call for so many cloves of garlic. This is the way that the plants grow. You can get sometimes a dozen or more from a single bulb. Now let's see what we have here. All of these cloves of garlic will make, each of these will make a full-size garlic plant next summer. And in planting them, use an ordinary garden soil, which is fairly well drained. Doesn't have to be terribly rich. Set the bulbs about 4 to 6 inches apart. You have to be very particular, about that far apart. And put them in the ground at this time of year about 3 inches deep. Just set them down like that and forget them. They'll be up in the spring. Try to make the top side-facing top. However, they'll grow regardless of whichever way you do it. Now, this is also a good time of the year to plant shallots. You can plant these just as well as you can the garlic. There is no trick to it at all. There is one thing that you should remember, that these bulbs are perfectly hardy over winter, and you can grow them in any part of the country. Now, do you remember about 3 weeks ago, I showed you a Christmas cactus in the greenhouse, and that plant had some tiny buds on it. Well, now it's in full flower, and I want you to appreciate it along with me. The Christmas cactus is unique in that it is not a desert type of cactus, but it comes from the jungles of South and Central America, where it grows normally up in the crotches of trees. It grows in the shade, and the soil around it, or the leaf mold in which it grows, is always moist. Those things you should think of when you consider caring for this. In other words, don't allow the soil ever to get dry. Now, if you want to get flowers, you have to allow the plant to have a cool rest period. Now, this plant went outdoors in the spring in a shady place, was watered all summer long, allowed to stay out until the night temperature was getting down close to 40 degrees, then brought in, and the flower buds form. They form when the temperatures are cool. Now let's look here at something else we have growing. Here is a little rose bush, which we started from a cutting in June, now about so large, close to a foot tall or so. You can grow something like this. It began with about a 4-inch cutting, now a good-sized plant. I'll put that in my cold frame over winter and set it in the garden next spring. Next we have a hypericum. Now, this might be a new name to you, called hypericum. A very handsome plant with yellow flowers. This variety grows about 2 feet tall. I started from a cutting in this instance. It had just 1 leaf on it, and it was about 1 inch long. Now you see the size of this plant, and I'm going to take another cutting of it. Just pop it off like that, remove a couple of those extra leaves, We'll take off a couple more of them. Now we'll move this over here and we'll put some rooting powder on the base of it, like that. And stick that right down in some coarse sand, which is moist. We'll put a little cover over it like that as though it were a little greenhouse, and that will begin to grow very quickly. In another month, that will be rooted, and we'll have another one of these hypericums growing. Very easy way that you can propagate some of your garden plants. It's kind of nice sometimes to have plants to give to some of your friends. You can see a cucumber vine that we started here a few weeks ago, making beautiful growth, already sending out tendrils. If you have a good sunny picture window, there's no reason that you can't grow a cucumber vine. Put strings up for it to grow on, and you can harvest cucumbers in the wintertime. Now, in my plant clinic today, I have a very, very sick passionflower vine. It is a vine. You can see the size of the long tendrils that grow from it. This plant has it blossomed during the summertime, has gone into its rest period, and is commencing new growth again. Now, if you can tell among all of this dead foliage, you might be able to see down in here the fact that we are beginning to get new buds coming. So we'll just prune off all of this dead stuff and prune back the pieces like so, and then we will be able to get this plant resurrected for another growing season. This is a lot of this is just purely dead. Right off like that and cut these back. Now that doesn't look particularly effective, I suppose, at this time, but I'm going to repot this into fresh soil, and we'll take some cuttings of these ends. But you know, I've been speaking here about the passionflower vine, and maybe you don't know what a passionflower looks like. Let me show you a picture of it. This is passionflowers. This particular one is, like the picture, a pale lavender color. Now, there are varieties with bright red flowers. Now, the passion in this case refers to the Passion of Christ. And this plant grows wild in Mexico. When the first Spanish missionaries came, they used the various sections of the flower as a sort of a legendary way to explain the mysteries of the crucifixion to their converts. Now, beginning with the end of a plant such as this, we can take a little cutting off, something like that. This one is about 2.5 inches long. I'll just bring some of my materials over here. Again, we're going to dip this one in water because it's rather dry. Put it down in here and slip it right into a pot. Now that's all there is to growing a passionflower vine. In a very short time, I would say within 3 weeks, that will have roots, and we can grow that. Then we pot it into ordinary potting soil. Give your passionflower vine bright sunshine, a rich soil which you keep barely moist at all times. It makes a very excellent house plant. It's not a very common plant, but you can find it at many garden centers. I know that I've seen it advertised in horticulture magazines. You can send away and get them if you can't get the one from a local source. That's the passionflower, comes in many different kinds. Well, let's see today if we can answer a few questions. Now, the first one says, can maple leaves be used to dig into the garden in the fall? Well, I guess you can, not only maple leaves, but any kind of leaves. Now, I consider it a sacrilege to burn leaves. All of those leaves contain the trace elements which the tree roots have extracted from deep within the soil. If you put those leaves on your compost pile or dig them into your garden, you will have a good garden for it. It's a marvelous way to do it. I wouldn't burn a leaf for any reason. Here is one that says, have you ever tried storing dahlia bulbs in a hole 1.5 feet deep outside, but against the foundation wall with a south or east exposure? And that's for the winter months. Well, now, I have never done it. It sounds like a great idea. And it's one of the nice things about gardening. You can always learn something new. That sounds like a fine way to do, because dahlias have a way of shriveling when you put them in the cellar, and they're not easy to bring through the winter. My 14-year-old bird of paradise plant has never bloomed, although it has grown over 5 feet tall with 30 to 40 leaves. How do I make it bloom? Well, perhaps it has flowers even by now because your plant has just arrived at the stage where it's big enough to have blossoms. It's a very long period of time before it blossoms. It likes to be cool and sunny. A lot of people have become discouraged and thrown them away just before they were old enough to send out blossoms. Can I plant tulip bulbs in a flower box on my porch for blooming next spring? Now that's one from New Hampshire where the climate is cold. Yes, you can, but I wouldn't leave that window box or that flower box on the porch for the winter because the ground would freeze too solidly. Instead, put it on the ground, plant your bulbs in it, then cover the whole thing over with leaves. Then next spring, pull off your leaves, move the box back up on the porch, and you'll have a nice display of flowers along in May and June. In May. One from Vermont, I have a dwarf red plum tree that grew so much that it is no longer dwarf. When is the best time to trim it, fall or when the tree is dormant? Well, early spring is the very best time, and you should do it before the buds swell. This one really threw me. It says, my Columbia orange blossom plant never produces flowers. Please advise. Well, I got this question a couple of days ago, and I thought, well, I have never heard of a Columbia orange blossom plant, so I went to my reference books, and I have hundreds of them, and that no such a plant was listed. So what I'd say to you is, the scientific name is the only way that you'll know really what you have. You should take your plant to a garden center, have it identified, then I'll tell you how to take care of it. Well, now they say that's all the time we have for this week, but next week we're going to dig some dahlia tubers. We're going to dig some gladiolus corms, and we'll talk about storage of those. We're going to pot up some more bulbs for blooming in the spring, and then we have some more work to do in our fall soil preparation. I'm Jim Crockett in Crockett's Victory Garden, and I hope you enjoy the program every week.